The Odd Snow Thief. This little encounter is probably a little more amusing strange than it was creepy. I never felt like I was threatened or anything, but the guy in question is someone who I definitely didn't want to get too close to. It was last winter, when I was walking home from work. I was passing through a small parking lot running alongside an office building. Against the wall of the building, in a no parking spot, was a parked car with the trunk wide open. I then noticed a man, probably in his late 40s, standing behind the car, and he seemed to be desperately scooping up as much snow as he could along the side of the building and throwing it into his trunk. He was doing this very quickly, as if he had been afraid of being caught stealing snow or something. Anyways, my walk took me a little closer to the man. He hadn't yet seen me walking along when he stopped piling snow into his trunk and started picking snow up off the ground and rubbing it violently against his legs. He was making an angry grunting noise as he did so, which confused me, and I figured that maybe he was trying to clean his pants somehow. I was relatively close at this point, maybe 20 feet away, and could tell that his pants weren't even dirty or anything. They were totally clean looking. Then he paused. His body didn't move an inch other than his head, which abruptly turned towards me. The man stood there, motionless, hunched over with snow in his hands, staring at me. It wasn't the sort of stare I expected. I thought he would have looked a lot more embarrassed or something, but instead he was staring at me as if I just defecated on his porch or something. He was completely still, like a statue, staring at me as if I've done something horribly wrong. It wasn't even remotely friendly looking in any way, but the mere thought of what I had just interrupted left me feeling more giggly than intimidated. So I kept walking. I tried my best not to look, but I could tell that he was watching me out of the corner of my eye until I rounded the corner of the building. I don't know what that man was doing with the snow, but I'm glad I wasn't closer to him when he saw me, because that was a look that could kill. I couldn't take it seriously though, because come on, the man was throwing snow into his trunk and wiping it all over his pants. After I rounded the corner of the building, I couldn't hold it in and just started laughing out loud at the strange man I had just watched stealing snow. Man in the Snow. This encounter is real and happened to me 6 years ago when I was 16. For context, I'm female. I live in New England, a northeastern region of the United States, where the winters are very snowy, with long, cold, dark nights and short days. One such night in February, I was alone in my parents' house, which is in a safe, quiet suburban neighborhood, where the houses are within about 100 feet of each other. My parents had divorced years before, and were still on good terms, so when my mom decided to sell the childhood home, my dad bought it so I could continue living there. While in the process of moving, neither of my parents stayed at the house for a couple of nights, and only my room upstairs had furniture. The rest of the house was mostly empty, with boxes scattered about, and the internet had not yet been switched over, so I often sat at the far end of the living room and mooched off of our neighbor's Wi-Fi. It was fun not having my parents there for a couple of nights, so I stayed up late with my new laptop and surfed the web into the early hours of the morning. During my second night of being alone, it snowed late into the evening, and I sat in the dark living room on a folding chair with only my laptop screen for light, with snow falling quietly outside. The neighborhood was silent, as cars don't usually drive past 10 at night, and neighbors stay inside to keep warm. At 2:30 a.m., I decided to head to bed, and was wrapping up my internet activities for the night when I heard 3 very slow, quiet knocks on the front door, just a few feet away. I immediately closed my laptop, knowing that the bright screen made me visible to the person outside since the windows weren't covered. I got off of my chair and walked very quietly over to the door and knelt down below a window to listen outside. Frozen with fear, I waited for what was probably about 2 full minutes when I heard 3 more identical knocks. They were very slow and would have been too quiet to wake anyone up who had been sleeping. I gathered the courage to look outside through the window and saw a dark figure standing very close to the front door, dressed in a black winter coat and black pants. A hood pulled over his head obscured his face and hair, and he stood still with his arms to his side. I contemplated calling the police, but ultimately decided to continue waiting. I moved back behind the door away from the window, and after about 2 more minutes passed, I could see the man walking down the walkway past the front of the house, leaving. Suddenly he stopped, turned around, and looked directly at the window through which I had watched him. About 15 seconds passed as we stared at each other, but I couldn't see his face under the darkness of his hood. Finally, he turned around and walked down the driveway and down the street. He didn't stop at any other houses, just continued walking down the street in the falling snow, and I watched him for about 10 minutes until he faded into the darkness. As far as I know, this has not happened since. I still live in that house and occasionally have nightmares in which the scene replays itself, except that in the dreams, I open the door for him. Snow day. A couple years ago, I found myself in a very disturbing situation. I was getting off work at my student internship in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it had been snowing all day. Now, for all you guys who live in the South, you know it's a big deal when it even calls for snow, and grocery stores are raided the nights before. I had decided to go and get some groceries to enjoy with my girlfriend, now wife, since the mayhem had ended and only people like me who had trucks or all-terrain vehicles could get around. I went into Walmart and got the groceries I needed and started my way back to the truck. It had started to snow harder, and there was already about 5 to 7 inches on the ground, and it was around 12 in the afternoon. I was daydreaming about sledding and watching movies the next couple of days with my girlfriend. Just then, as I almost reached my truck, I was jolted by the act of someone grabbing my arm. As I turned around, I saw an older-looking lady who was maybe 5'6". She asked me if I had cigarettes. Now, I don't smoke, so I told her no, I did not, and turned back to my truck. Again, she gently tugged my arm, and then she told me that she just got here from Alabama on a bus with her granddaughter and dog, and she was here for breast cancer treatment and wanted money for a hotel. Again, I honestly told her I had no money on me. At this point, she said, "Do you know the area well?" Wanting to get out of the situation, I told her that I did not, which is a lie. Thinking now she'd leave me alone, then she asked, "Oh, okay, well, since the weather is so bad, will you drive me to my hotel so I can meet up with my granddaughter and her dog, who are in the hotel lobby waiting? It's right up the road here, I can show you." Me being a Christian, and was always taught to help someone out, so even though everything at this moment told me to deny this woman again, I told her sure, since I was raised on the rule never judge a book by its cover. Plus, being a male at 6 foot, I figured I could take her if things got dicey. So she jumped into my truck against all odds, and the next thing I know, she's smoking a cigarette in my truck, and I told her politely to please put it out. Being nervous, I missed my first red flag when she asked me for a cigarette, since she obviously had some. She obliged, and threw the cigarette out the window to my dismay, so we started driving up the road towards her hotel, at which I was on high alert. At the moment of going through the worst-case scenarios in my head, I notched her fumbling through her purse searching for something, and looking out of the corner of her eye at me, at which I told her, "Just so you know, I have a gun in my truck, so don't try anything crazy." Now, I did have a gun, but it was a shotgun that I had neglected to get out of my backseat a couple days earlier, and in reality, this would do me no good if she pulled a gun on me at that moment. At this, she stopped messing around in her purse and pulled out her cell phone in her pocket. She looked at me and said, "Actually, do you mind taking a detour? I need to pick up some money from some friends." Okay, at this point in time, red flags were firing off, but again, never judging a book by its cover kept running through my mind. So I told her that that was fine, but we had to make it quick because I needed to make it home. At that moment, she dialed someone on the phone and said, "Yeah, this guy is coming over to bring me to get the stuff. Are you ready?" At that point, I asked her to talk to the person. When I answered the phone, a man who sounded like he's been chain smoking since birth said, "Hello." I started asking him questions like, "What's your name?" and asked him if he indeed knew of any hotels nearby. He seemed to stumble over his words. Then he said he had to go. At this point, I should have gotten a clue and kicked her out of my car, especially after watching so many horror movies. This is when the person goes against their gut and pays for it. But for fear of her actually telling the truth, and me feeling like a horrible person, I decided to go on. At this point, we turned down the street and I saw a cop car sitting there off to the side. I wanted to drop her off with the cop, but it would be terrible if she was actually telling the truth. So I passed the cop, and at this point, with a weird, eerie smile on her face, said, "Glad he's there. Now I feel safe." Now, as we entered the apartment complex, I saw how run down it was. It looked to be a place where heavy drug traffic was going down, just a very unsettling place even during the snow. As I parked outside the place she said was her friend's, she said, "Okay, I'll go get the guy and be back." At this, I was very unsettled by everything. Things just didn't seem right. She saw my facial expression of wanting to just get the heck out of there, and to this she sneered at me, saying something along the lines of me being a terrible person if I left her there, in this weather, under her condition. At this, I got mad. After all, I went out of her way to help her. As I waited, I started to think about the things that could happen. What if she brought a gun back, or worse? At that moment, I saw 3 guys coming towards my truck. I realized things were not right. She had set me up to rob me or something, because these guys were big, and one of them had something behind his back which I couldn't see. At that moment, I put it in reverse and took off. I looked back to them chasing me, and see what was behind them was one of the guys with a crowbar. I don't know what would have happened to me, but now looking back, I see how dumb and how blind I was. There was no hotel anywhere close to the area I was in. The nearest motel or hotel was 20 minutes away. Had I waited for the guys to get to my truck, they probably would have beaten me up and robbed me, or worse. I thank God every day that I escaped and was able to get married and tell this event. After that, I've never been to that Walmart ever again, or that area for the matter. A couple months later, I told a coworker this story, and he told me that a year ago, the same lady tried the same thing on him, but he declined altogether. So, horrible lady who lied about having breast cancer to trick people into awful things. I hope you get what's coming to you, and let's never meet again. So be careful who you help out, because some people will take advantage of you, or even worse.